The snow had started before dawn, the kind that fell soft at first, pretty, almost harmless, before turning mean as the hours dragged on. By late afternoon, the plains of Wyoming were buried under a thick white sheet, the wind howling like it had something to prove. Caleb Hart stood at the edge of the train platform anyway. His coat was dusted white, his hat pulled low, boots planted firm against the frozen boards. Most men would have waited inside the station, near the stove and the coffee pot. But Caleb had been waiting out here for over an hour, eyes fixed down the tracks, breath fogging the air. "She might not even come," the station master muttered from the doorway. Caleb didn't turn. "She'll come," he said quietly. The truth was, he didn't know that. But he needed to believe it. 3 months of letters sat folded in the inside pocket of his coat. Careful handwriting. Polite at first. Then warmer. Curious. Hopeful. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, a schoolteacher from Missouri who'd answered his advertisement in a women's newspaper, respectable rancher seeks wife. Honest work. Good home. Loneliness optional. He hadn't meant the last part as a joke. It was just the truth. The whistle cut through the storm like a blade. Caleb's spine straightened as the train emerged from the white haze, steel groaning, brakes screaming as it slowed. Snow swirled wildly as the cars hissed to a stop. Doors opened. A handful of passengers hurried down, bundled tight, faces red from the cold. And then he saw her. She stood uncertainly at the top of the steps, one gloved hand clutching a small leather suitcase, the other gripping the rail. Snowflakes clung to her dark coat and tangled in her chestnut hair, which had escaped its pins in the wind. She looked nothing like the women back home. Too refined. Too soft. Too brave to be standing there alone. Caleb stepped forward instinctively, boots crunching. He took off his hat, not because of manners, but because suddenly, it felt like the right thing to do. "Miss Whitmore," he called. She looked up sharply. Her eyes were gray. Not dull, storm gray. The kind that held questions. "Yes." Her voice trembled, not weak, just cold. Caleb stopped a few feet away, suddenly aware of how big he must look to her. 6'2", broad shoulders, wind-burned face. He softened his tone. "I'm Caleb Hart." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither of them moved. The snow fell harder, the wind tugging at her coat like it wanted to steal her back. He noticed the small details then, the worn edges of her gloves, the scuff on her suitcase, the way she stood straight despite the cold. This wasn't a woman chasing romance. This was a woman chasing survival. I thought you'd be inside," she said finally, glancing toward the station. Caleb gave a small, almost shy smile. "I've been waiting out here." Something shifted in her expression. Not relief exactly. Something deeper. He reached for her suitcase, slow enough that she could refuse. She didn't. "Let's get you warm," he said. "Storm's not done yet." Inside the station, Eleanor thawed by the stove while Caleb signed the papers for her ticket trunk. She watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, how he spoke little but listened well, how the townsfolk nodded to him with quiet respect. This wasn't Missouri. This wasn't the life she'd known. When they stepped back outside, the snow had swallowed the road. Caleb's horse-drawn sleigh waited nearby, blanketed and patient. "You still want to go through with this?" he asked suddenly, turning to face her fully. "You can stay in town. No pressure. I won't think less of you." Eleanor searched his face. She saw honesty there. And loneliness. And something steady. "I didn't come all this way to turn back," she said. Caleb nodded once. Respect. As the sleigh began its slow journey into the white wilderness, Eleanor pulled her coat tighter, heart pounding, not with fear, but with possibility. Behind them, the train whistle faded. Ahead of them lay a ranch buried in snow, a stranger's home, and a marriage that existed only on paper. For now. The ranch house emerged from the snow like something carved out of memory rather than wood. Warm light glowed through the windows, a quiet promise against the roaring white night. Caleb pulled the sleigh to a stop and climbed down first, boots crunching. He reached up to help Eleanor, his gloved hands steady as she took them. The moment her boots touched the ground, the wind howled harder, as if testing her resolve. "This is it," he said simply. Eleanor looked around. The barn stood solid a short distance away, half buried in snow. Fence posts disappeared into the storm. Beyond that, nothing. Miles of quiet. "So much space," she murmured. Caleb watched her closely, ready for doubt, for regret. Instead, she lifted her chin. "I think I could learn to breathe here." Something eased in his chest. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and soap. It was clean but plainly lived in, handmade furniture, a rifle above the mantel, a pair of worn boots by the door. No clutter. No softness. Eleanor took it all in. "This is your home," she said. "Our home," he corrected gently. Then paused. "If you want it to be." She set her suitcase down slowly. "I do." Caleb cleared his throat and shrugged off his coat. "I'll get more firewood. Supper's already warming. Nothing fancy." "That's fine," she said quickly. "I can help." He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to." That word again. They moved around each other awkwardly at first, like two people learning the shape of a shared space. Eleanor removed her gloves and coat, fingers stiff with cold. Caleb noticed immediately. "You're freezing." Before she could protest, he pulled a thick wool shawl from the back of a chair and draped it around her shoulders. Careful, respectful, his hands barely brushing her. "Thank you," she said softly. Supper was simple: stew, bread, coffee, but Eleanor ate like she hadn't had a warm meal in days. Caleb watched her from across the table, pretending not to. He noticed how her shoulders relaxed, how color slowly returned to her cheeks. "Letters don't tell you everything," she said suddenly. He looked up. "No, ma'am. I imagined this place differently. Less real." He smiled faintly. "I imagined you taller." She laughed, surprised, and the sound filled the room in a way nothing else had. Silence settled afterward, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. "I should explain something," Caleb said, setting his cup down. "I won't touch you unless you ask me to. This marriage, it doesn't have to be rushed. You've already done something brave coming here." Eleanor met his gaze, serious now. "And you?" "I've lived alone a long time." She nodded, understanding more than he expected. "May I see my room?" she asked. Caleb stood. "Of course." He led her down the narrow hall and opened a door. The room was small but warm. A quilt folded neatly on the bed. Fresh water on the washstand. A window frosted with ice. "You prepared this," she said. He shrugged. "Did my best." She touched the quilt, then turned to face him. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Eleanor." He lingered a second too long, then stepped back, closing the door gently behind him. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. This wasn't romance. Not yet. This was something steadier. Something earned. Later that night, the storm worsened. Wind battered the house. Snow packed against the windows. A loud crack of thunder jolted Eleanor awake. She sat up, breath quick, memories of lonely nights flooding back. Before fear could swallow her, there was a knock at the door. "Eleanor." Caleb's voice, low, careful. "Storm's bad. Just wanted you to know you're not alone." She opened the door. He stood there in shirt sleeves, concern plain on his face. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I came." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two strangers bound by paper and choice and something neither had named yet. Then Caleb nodded. "Sleep easy." As he turned away, Eleanor felt it clearly for the first time. This house wasn't just holding his silence anymore. It was beginning to hold her hope. The storm broke sometime before dawn. By morning, the world outside the ranch lay silent and blindingly white, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel important. Eleanor stood at the window, watching Caleb shovel a path from the house to the barn, his movements steady and practiced. This was his land. And now, somehow, it was hers too. "Town run today," he said when he came inside, snow clinging to his shoulders. "Supplies. You don't have to come." Eleanor turned from the window. "I want to." Caleb studied her, measuring something unseen. Finally, He nodded. All right. The town of Pine Ridge was small enough that news traveled faster than weather. By the time they arrived, every eye already knew why Eleanor was there. She felt them the moment she stepped down from the wagon. Curious. Appraising. Some kind. Some sharp. A woman outside the general store whispered openly, "Mail order," like it was a diagnosis. Eleanor kept her spine straight. Inside the store, shelves were stacked tight with supplies. Caleb moved ahead, listing items with quiet efficiency. Eleanor followed, hands folded, aware of the weight of every glance. "Well, I'll be," a man drawled from near the counter. Caleb Hart finally went and bought himself a wife. The room stilled. Caleb stopped walking. Eleanor's breath caught, not because of the words, but because she didn't know what he would do. He turned slowly, voice calm but firm. "Her name's Eleanor." A pause. "And she wasn't bought." The man shrugged, uncomfortable now. "Didn't mean." "I know what you meant," Caleb said. "And you won't say it again." The silence stretched. Then someone cleared their throat. The store breathed again. Eleanor hadn't realized she was trembling until Caleb's hand brushed hers, brief, grounding. Outside, she let out a shaky breath. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He looked at her. "Yes, I did." They continued through town, post office, butcher, dry goods. Some folks warmed quickly. Others stayed cold. But Caleb never once walked ahead of her. Never once left her to face it alone. At the church steps, an older woman approached, her face weathered but kind. "I'm Mrs. Holloway," she said. "People talk because they're bored. If you need anything, company, sewing, a place to sit, you're welcome." Eleanor smiled, genuine this time. "Thank you." As they climbed back into the wagon, Eleanor glanced at Caleb. "You've done this before," she said. "Defending what's mine," he replied. She met his gaze. "Standing your ground." His jaw tightened. "Once. Long time ago." The ride home was quiet but not heavy. That evening, as Eleanor unpacked the last of her belongings, she found a folded letter tucked inside her Bible. Her sister's handwriting. Old. "Read 100 times. You don't need love at first sight. You need someone who stays." She looked up to find Caleb in the doorway. "Supper's ready," he said. Then hesitated. "You okay?" Eleanor nodded, holding the letter to her chest. "I think so." After supper, they sat by the fire. The flames cast long shadows across the walls. Eleanor spoke first. "I know what people think of me," she said. "And maybe they're not entirely wrong. I needed a way out." Caleb didn't interrupt. "But I didn't come here to pretend," she continued. "If this is going to work, I need to be more than something you ordered." His voice was low. "Certain. You already are." She looked at him then, not as a stranger, not as a husband by contract, but as a man choosing her again and again in small, visible ways. Outside, the night settled deep and still. Inside, something fragile but real took root. And for the first time since arriving, Eleanor felt it clearly. She wasn't just surviving this place. She was beginning to belong. Spring tried to come early that year. Patches of snow melted into mud, and the air carried a faint promise of warmth that felt almost cruel after such a long winter. Eleanor had begun to learn the rhythms of the ranch, feeding the chickens, mending small tears, riding beside Caleb in quiet companionship that felt safer than words. Too safe, maybe. That afternoon, a rider appeared at the edge of the property. Eleanor noticed him first. He was well dressed for the territory, hat clean, posture confident. He dismounted near the fence, glancing toward the house like he already belonged. Caleb stiffened the moment he saw him. "I'll handle this," he said. Eleanor followed anyway, stopping a few steps behind. "Caleb Hart," the man said with an easy smile. "Didn't think you'd ever settle down." Caleb's voice cooled. "Daniel Mercer." Daniel's gaze slid to Eleanor, assessing. "So this is her." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I have a name." Daniel chuckled. "I'm sure you do." "That's enough," Caleb said sharply. Daniel raised his hands. "Relax. I came with news. The railroad's expanding west. They want land. Yours sits right in the middle. Eleanor looked at Caleb. Is that bad? It is if they push, Caleb replied. Daniel's eyes flicked between them. You always were stubborn. Cost you once, didn't it? The words landed heavy. Caleb turned away. You should go. Daniel shrugged. Offer stands. Think about it. When he rode off, the air felt thinner. Later that night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The way Caleb had closed off, walls snapping up, haunted her. She found him in the barn, lantern low, hands busy brushing a horse that didn't need it. Who was he? She asked. Caleb didn't look up. Someone who reminds me why I don't trust easy. She waited. Finally, he sighed. I was married once. The words hit harder than she expected. Her name was Ruth, he continued. Town sweetheart. Married young. I thought love was enough. Eleanor swallowed. She got sick. Needed treatment back east. I sold part of the land to pay for it. Railroad men promised to help. His jaw tightened. They didn't. Took the land anyway. Ruth died thinking I failed her. Eleanor stepped closer. Caleb, that wasn't your fault. He finally met her eyes, raw and unguarded. I swore I'd never love like that again. Never let someone depend on me. And yet, she said softly, you sent for me. He exhaled. I thought I could keep it simple. Safe. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Eleanor reached out, resting her hand over his. He didn't pull away. I didn't come here to replace her, she said. And I won't leave you alone with ghosts. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Caleb's hand tightened around hers, not desperate, not forceful. Honest. If I cross this line, he said, voice low, I won't be able to step back. Her heart raced. Then don't step back. He leaned in, but stopped inches from her lips, breath warm, eyes searching. Tell me to stop. She didn't. Caleb closed the distance slowly, the kiss careful at first, then deeper, months of restraint breaking in a single quiet moment. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Outside, rain began to fall, washing the last of winter away. And with it, the lie that this marriage was only on paper. The rain didn't stop. It came down hard through the night, turning the thawed earth into thick, sucking mud. By morning, the creek at the far edge of the property had swollen into a rushing, angry thing. Caleb stood on the porch, jaw tight. If that bank gives way, he said, we lose the lower pasture. And the cattle, Eleanor added quietly. He looked at her, surprised. Not that she understood, but that she cared enough to say it first. I need to move them, he said, before the water takes more ground. I'm coming. He didn't argue this time. They rode out together, rain soaking through coats, wind sharp and unforgiving. The cattle were restless, lowing in confusion as the creek crept closer, water chewing at the soil. Caleb worked fast, shouting commands, riding hard. Eleanor stayed back at first, helping from the edges, opening gates as he signaled. Then everything went wrong. A young steer slipped in the mud, sliding toward the water. The bank crumbled beneath it. Without thinking, Eleanor ran. Eleanor! Caleb shouted. She grabbed the rope from the post, looping it clumsily but tight, planting her boots as the steer thrashed. The weight yanked her forward, mud swallowing her ankles. Caleb reached her just in time, bracing behind her, his arms locking around hers, anchoring them both. Hold, he growled. Together, they pulled, muscle and will and fear twisting into one. The steer stumbled free, hooves finding ground again. But Eleanor slipped. The mud gave way beneath her feet, and she cried out as she slid toward the rushing water. Caleb let go of the rope. He dove. His hand caught her wrist just as the creek surged up, icy and violent. Water slammed into his side, trying to tear them apart. I've got you, he yelled. Eleanor clung to him, terror blinding, but his grip never faltered. With a roar of effort, he hauled her back, inch by inch, until they collapsed on solid ground, soaked and shaking. For a moment, the world narrowed to breath and rain and heartbeat. Then Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he didn't. "Don't ever do that again," he said hoarsely. She pressed her face into his chest. "I couldn't watch you lose this." He stilled. "This land," she whispered, "is part of you, and I won't be the reason you bleed alone." Caleb closed his eyes. Later, back at the house, Eleanor sat wrapped in blankets while Caleb tended a cut on his arm. His hands trembled slightly. "You scared me," he admitted. She reached for him. "You didn't fail her, Caleb." His head snapped up. "You saved me today," she continued. "You stayed. That's who you are." The weight he'd carried for years finally cracked. He leaned forward, forehead resting against hers. "I love you," he said, the words raw and unpracticed. "I tried not to. But I do." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "I loved you before I knew the shape of your scars," she replied. "And now I love you because of them." They kissed, not careful this time. Certain. Outside, the rain eased. The creek receded, leaving the land battered but standing. And for the first time, Caleb believed something else might stand too. Their future. The railroad men came a week later. 2 wagons. 3 men in long coats. Papers in hand and confidence in their stride. They stopped at the edge of the property like they already owned it. Caleb read the notice once. Then again. "They're offering money," Eleanor said, standing beside him on the porch. "More than before." "Enough to walk away," he replied. "Not enough to start over." The lead man adjusted his gloves. "You've got 30 days, Mr. Hart. Take the deal, or we proceed legally." After they left, the ranch felt smaller somehow. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She knew what this land meant to Caleb. She also knew what it had already cost him. By morning, she had made her choice. She rode into Pine Ridge alone. At the town hall, she stood before men who had barely learned her name, her hands steady despite the murmurs. "I'm Eleanor Hart," she said clearly. "And this land is my home." They listened, first out of curiosity, then respect, as she spoke of fairness, of promises broken, of what happens when powerful men assume quiet people will step aside. The newspaper ran her words 2 days later. Ranch wife challenges railroad claim. Pressure followed. Questions. Delays. The railroad backed off. When Eleanor returned home, Caleb was waiting on the porch, fear written plainly on his face. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. "I know," she answered. "I did it anyway." He crossed the distance in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "You chose this life," he murmured. "Chose me." She smiled against his chest. "I choose you. Every day." They were married properly that summer. No contracts, no advertisements. Just vows spoken beneath an open sky. Neighbors gathered close, Mrs. Holloway dabbing her eyes. Caleb built Eleanor a schoolhouse by the creek once it settled. She filled it with children, laughter, and a life she never imagined could be hers. On winter mornings, years later, she'd sometimes find Caleb standing on the porch, watching the road. "Waiting for someone," she'd tease. He'd pull her close, voice low and fond. "I've already got everything I was waiting for." And in the quiet of the snow-covered land, the mail-order bride and the cowboy proved something rare and true. Love chosen freely is stronger than fate.